There is a moment in season 6 of Regular Show where a blue jay in a rented tuxedo stands at a podium in front of his best friend's wedding ceremony, holding a letter that was not written for him, in a room full of people who came to see two other people get married, and he begins to talk about himself. He does not mean to ruin anything. He thinks he is being brave. He thinks that what he is doing right now, in this moment, in front of these people, is the honest thing, the adult thing, the thing a man with a gut feeling is supposed to do when he trusts that feeling and follows it. The room goes quiet. His girlfriend is sitting in the third row. His ex-girlfriend is sitting somewhere behind her. His best friend, who is supposed to be getting married in about 90 seconds, is standing off to the side with a stunned look on his face. And the blue jay keeps talking. He talks about his love life. He talks about not knowing who his soulmate is. He gestures vaguely at the audience, at strangers, at anyone. He does not gesture at the woman who drove to this wedding on a bicycle just to be near him. He does not point in her direction even once. And then he turns toward her and opens his mouth to say something, and she stands up before he can finish. And she hands him back a bracelet he gave her, and she runs out of the room crying. And in that moment, without either of them fully understanding it yet, a relationship that took 5 years to build ends forever. This is the story of Mordecai's worst decision. Not a moment of anger. Not a betrayal. Not a fight. A choice made in a moment of what he thought was clarity, in front of an audience that did not ask to be there, using words that were not his, acting on a feeling he had been lying to himself about for months. Dumped at the Altar aired on June 25th, 2015. It is the 28th episode of season 6. It is the season finale. It is also, by almost any measure that matters, the single moment where Mordecai's entire arc collapses into the shape of a person he has been becoming for a very long time without noticing. This is not a video about whether he should have picked Margaret or CJ. That question is a trap. This is a video about what that speech actually reveals, what it costs, what it destroys, and what it tells you about a character the show has been patient with for 6 seasons. Welcome to Velvo. Get comfortable. This one goes deep. Let us get into it. To understand why the speech at Muscleman's wedding is the worst decision Mordecai ever makes, you have to understand what kind of person Mordecai has always been. And the show lays this out almost immediately. Regular Show premiered on September 6th, 2010 on Cartoon Network. And from the very first season, Mordecai is introduced as the one who is supposedly the responsible half of the duo. Rigby is the chaos. Mordecai is the break. Mordecai is the one who hesitates, who second guesses, who wants to do the right thing, but is usually talked out of it by Rigby's immediate gratification. On paper, he is the straight man. In practice, from the very beginning, the show is quietly showing you something different. It is showing you a person who hesitates, not because he is thoughtful, but because he is afraid. A person who second guesses, not because he is careful, but because he cannot make decisions. A person who wants to do the right thing, but only when the right thing is pointed out to him by someone else. This is a person whose default state is inaction, and the show dresses that inaction up as maturity for about 3 seasons, before it starts to turn the camera on what inaction actually looks like from the outside. There is a scene in season 1 where Mordecai goes to the coffee shop to see Margaret, and he does not say anything meaningful to her. He orders his coffee. He makes small talk. He leaves. This happens in nearly every early episode. The show is training you to read it as a crush. Mordecai is shy. Mordecai is nervous. Mordecai has a thing for the pretty waitress and cannot quite summon the courage to tell her. That is the surface. But the show keeps doing it. Episode after episode. Season after season. He goes to the shop. He says nothing. He leaves. At some point, the question becomes less about whether he has the courage and more about what exactly he is waiting for. The answer the show eventually gives you, buried in his behavior rather than in his dialogue, is that he is waiting for someone else to make the choice for him. He wants Margaret to confess first. He wants Rigby to push him into it. He wants the universe to arrange itself so that he cannot lose. That is the whole engine of Mordecai's romantic life before dumped at the altar. He does not make choices. He waits for choices to be made available to him. And when they are made available, he takes them. And when they are taken away, he collapses. Think about what that actually means. A person who only moves forward when the way forward is guaranteed. A person who only speaks when the answer is already known. That is not the behavior of someone who is shy. That is the behavior of someone who cannot tolerate the possibility of being wrong. And that distinction matters, because dumped at the altar is what happens when that person is finally forced, by his own cowardice catching up with him, to make an actual decision. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The first real moment the show tests Mordecai is in the Season 4 premiere, Exit 9B. That episode aired on October 1st, 2012, and it was watched by 3.047 million viewers, a series record at the time. But before any of that, buried 3 episodes from the end of Season 4, in an episode called Picking Up Margaret, Mordecai finally kisses Margaret. It happens at an airport. She is about to fly to visit her dream college. He has spent the entire episode trying to get there to see her off. He arrives at the last possible second, and they kiss. And it is the first time in the show's entire run that the thing he has been circling for 3 seasons actually happens. Picking Up Margaret is Season 4, Episode 25. It is a real payoff. The audience has waited a long time for that moment, and the show immediately starts to complicate it. In Meteor Moves, Season 4, Episode 28, which first aired on June 10th, 2013, Mordecai and Margaret go to a meteor shower. The episode opens with Eileen mentioning that 2 celestial bodies will collide during the shower, and if they do not collide, they burn up and die. The show is not being subtle about what it is doing here. Mordecai and Margaret sit together. She tells him the real reason she does not want to leave for college is that she will miss him. They almost kiss. And in the moment they are about to, because Mordecai hesitates a fraction too long, the meteor shower pulls them into a literal dimension called the Friend Zone, ruled over by an ancient moon-faced creature called the Guardian of the Friend Zone, who explains that he ended up trapped there because he also hesitated, because he also waited too long, because he also could not commit to the moment when the moment was in front of him. The Guardian is a warning. The Guardian is what Mordecai will become if he does not change. And Mordecai, in that exact moment, does change. He tells the Guardian that he has wanted to kiss Margaret for a long time. He is given a second chance. He kisses her. They are released. Hold on to that. The show just told you, explicitly, that Mordecai's defining flaw is hesitation. Not cowardice. Hesitation. The inability to act when the moment is in front of him. Then comes Stake Me Amadeus, the Season 4 finale, which aired on August 12th, 2013. It is the 116th episode of the series. Mordecai plans a fancy dinner at a restaurant called Stake Me Amadeus to ask Margaret to officially be his girlfriend. The evening gets hijacked by a counterfeit money ring involving the return of the Capicola Gang, a bear-led group of villains from earlier in the show. There is a whole subplot involving Amadeus dollars, fake coupons, FBI agents clearly modeled on Mulder and Scully. But that is all decoration. The real story is the conversation Mordecai has been trying to have all night. He finally gets a moment alone with Margaret. He tells her he has something to say. She tells him she has something to say too. And when they finally exchange, she does not say she will be his girlfriend. She tells him she was accepted into her dream college. She is leaving. She cries. She runs out of the restaurant, and Mordecai drops to his knees, heartbroken. And the episode ends with him sitting on the roof of the park house, watching the sunset, saying nothing. Rigby sits down next to him, hands him a soda. That is the whole ending. Think about what just happened there. Mordecai finally found the courage to ask. He waited too long, and by the time he asked, the answer was already no. Not because Margaret did not love him, because life had moved on while he hesitated. The Guardian of the Friend Zone warned him about this exact outcome, and here it is. The tragic part is that the show does not hammer the point. It does not add music to tell you how to feel. It just puts him on the roof with a soda and lets the sun go down. That is the whole story. Stake Me Amadeus is also the episode where the show makes a choice that will echo through everything Mordecai does from here on out. It does not give him Margaret. It takes her away at the exact moment he finally steps up. That is a choice the writers made, and it is a cruel one, but it is also a precise one. Because the show is telling you something about Mordecai that none of his speeches ever do. He cannot have what he wants when he wants it, because he cannot want things on time. By the time he knows what he wants, the window is closing. By the time he speaks, the answer has already changed. That is the pattern. That is the shape of his life. And it is a pattern he refuses to see, which is why it will keep happening. Season 5 opens with Laundry Woes, which first aired on September 2nd, 2013. Mordecai is depressed. He has grown a beard. He is trying to drive 20 hours straight to Margaret's college to return her sweater. Rigby tells him this is insane and gets kicked out of the car. The sweater turns out to be a corrupting supernatural object trying to pull Mordecai back into his depression, which is not a subtle metaphor. It is a very direct metaphor. Mordecai, in the aftermath of losing Margaret, is being consumed by his own refusal to let her go. The show is externalizing his inner state as a literal monster. And when he finally destroys the sweater, what he is really destroying is the version of himself that was going to spend the rest of his life orbiting a person who chose college over him. He does not destroy it cleanly. He does not destroy it quickly. It takes an entire episode, and Rigby has to save him, because Mordecai cannot save himself. That, again, is the pattern. That is the whole story. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Then comes CJ. Her full name in the show is Cloudy J. She is voiced by Linda Cardellini. She first appears in the Season 3 episode Yes Dude Yes, which aired on May 7th, 2012. This is important because it means CJ exists in the show before Margaret leaves. She is introduced as a date. Rigby sets Mordecai up with through a website called Couple Corral, after Mordecai falls into a depression because he thinks Margaret is engaged. The engagement turns out to be a misunderstanding. Margaret's cousin John, who has a prosthetic wooden leg, was kneeling in front of her in a way that Mordecai, watching from outside the coffee shop, misread. So in Yes Dude Yes, Mordecai effectively courts CJ while still hung up on Margaret, and when he realizes Margaret is not engaged, he basically abandons CJ at a movie theater. CJ finds out. CJ turns into a literal hurricane, which is what she does when she is angry, because she is a cloud humanoid whose emotional state manifests as weather. She tells Mordecai off. She leaves. That is Season 3. Mordecai does not see her again for a long time. He dates Margaret in Season 4. Margaret leaves. He goes into depression in Season 5. And then, at a New Year's Eve party, in an episode called New Year's Kiss, which is Season 5, Episode 12, he bumps into CJ again. They kiss, unwittingly, because it is New Year's Eve, and everyone is kissing everyone. But the moment lands. CJ is back in his life, and the show starts building what is probably the healthiest romantic relationship Mordecai has ever been in, which makes what happens later so much worse. Through Season 5, Mordecai and CJ become friends, then start dating, then become a real couple. The episodes trace it carefully. Dodge This, Portable Toilet, Video 101, I Like You High, where Mordecai finally asks her out officially, Playdate, Tent Trouble, and then, at the end of Season 5, the finale, an episode called Real Date, which aired on August 14th, 2014. Real Date is the episode where Mordecai and CJ have their first actual romantic dinner. It is the episode where the villain is the CEO of Couple Corral, the dating site that set them up, who now wants them to break up so they will rejoin the site. The CEO's name is Matchmaker McIntyre. He tries to murder CJ with a missile called the Break Up You Later. Mordecai saves her life by taking the hit. He gives her a charm bracelet. Each charm on the bracelet represents an activity the two of them did on the day they met. Back in Yes Dude Yes, a shopping cart, a laser gun, a cloud-shaped bit of nonsense, a roller skate, a video game controller, a grilled cheese sandwich, a go-kart, an alligator, an air hockey mallet. The entire bracelet is a monument to the specific things the two of them did together, in a specific order, on a specific day. The bracelet gets welded into a single heart shape by the missile blast, which is the kind of ridiculous symbolism this show usually plays for laughs, but this time plays completely straight. That bracelet will be the object that ends their relationship. The episode where that happens is 1 year away. In between, Mordecai and CJ are in love. Keep that bracelet in mind. The show is going to use it. The show is going to break you with it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Season 6 starts in the fall of 2014, and the show makes a decision that will reshape everything. Margaret comes back. In the episode Eileen Flatscreen, she returns to town as a news reporter. She has finished college. She is back in Mordecai's life, whether he wants her there or not. And the show watches, with a kind of clinical patience, What happens to Mordecai when the two most important women in his romantic life start occupying the same social space? Because here's what you have to understand about Mordecai at this point in the story. He is dating CJ. CJ is the present. CJ is real. She is kind. She is funny. She likes the same things he likes. She cares about him enough to turn into a thundercloud when anyone threatens him. And Margaret is the past. Margaret is the ghost of the thing he wanted for 4 years and never quite had. Because the timing was never right. Because he waited too long. Because she left. Margaret is not a person to him anymore. She is a wound. She is a question that was never answered. And the show is about to make him answer it, whether he wants to or not. The first real collision comes in Merry Christmas Mordecai, the 10th episode of Season 6, which aired on December 4th, 2014. Eileen throws a Christmas sweater party. Margaret is invited. CJ is Mordecai's girlfriend and is going to be there. Mordecai is terrified, not because he does not know what he feels. He absolutely knows what he feels. He is terrified because he does not want to have to look at what he feels. So he tries to keep the two women apart all night. He fails in the most Mordecai way possible, which is to say, by panicking and awkwardly flailing at every possible intervention point. Margaret and CJ meet. It is awkward. CJ asks Mordecai if he still has feelings for Margaret. Mordecai says no. He says he is with CJ, that CJ has made him happy, that he wants to be there with her. CJ kisses him. She tells him that is all she needed to know. That is a crucial moment. That is the moment where Mordecai, had he been honest, had he been capable of honesty, could have actually closed the chapter. He said the right words. He said them to the right person. He just did not believe them himself. Later at the party, Mordecai runs into Margaret. He is trying to find CJ. He hides in a bathroom. Eventually, Margaret corners him, and they have a real conversation. He tells her things are different now. He tells her that dating CJ has made him happier. He tells her he hopes she can understand that. Margaret tells him she does understand. She tells him she is glad for him, that she never expected him to wait for her. They hug. They wish each other a Merry Christmas. And in that moment, Mordecai's imagination flashes back through every kiss they ever had, every good memory, every date, ending with meteor moves. And when the flashback ends, they are kissing. In the present. For real. Under a disco ball mistletoe that Rigby gave Eileen as a Christmas gift. They pull back immediately. They both apologize. And then they hear a small voice. They turn. CJ is standing there. Her eyes are filling with tears. The cloud around her body is starting to darken. She says Mordecai's name. Once. Quietly. And then she turns and runs out of the party. Mordecai chases her. She drives away before he can reach her. He runs back inside. He goes to the spare bedroom to find his phone. And when he opens the door, he sees boxes. Margaret's boxes. Eileen tells him the third thing she had been trying to tell him all episode. Margaret is her new roommate. Margaret is staying in town. Margaret is not leaving again. Let that sit for a second. Mordecai, at the beginning of the episode, had a girlfriend and a closed chapter. By the end of the episode, he has a betrayed girlfriend running away in tears, an ex-girlfriend who has now kissed him again, and lives in the same apartment his friends all hang out at, and no phone with which to call anyone. The show cuts to black. There is no resolution. The next episode, Sad Sacks, will patch things up between Mordecai and CJ, because CJ is gracious enough to accept his apology and give him another chance. But nothing about what happened at the Christmas party has actually been addressed. The kiss with Margaret was not discussed. The flashback in Mordecai's head that led to the kiss was not discussed. The fact that Margaret now lives 15 minutes from the park, in the same apartment Mordecai visits regularly because Eileen is his friend, was not discussed. The emotional infrastructure of the problem was not addressed at all. It was papered over, and that is what the entire second half of Season 6 is. Paper over cracks. Apologize. Move on. Wait for the next accident. The show is showing you, very carefully and very patiently, what it looks like when two people in a relationship stop addressing the real issue and start only addressing the surface events. Each event gets handled. Each argument gets resolved. And the thing underneath, the actual question, which is whether Mordecai has fully let go of Margaret, is never asked directly. because Mordecai will not ask it of himself, and CJ is too hurt by the implication to push him on it. They live in the unasked question. They keep living there for months. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next major collision is 1000th Chopper Flight Party, which is Season 6, Episode 20, and aired on March 12th, 2015. Margaret's dad, Frank, is a helicopter news reporter, and he is celebrating his 1000th flight. He invites Mordecai and Rigby to the party, because even though Mordecai and Margaret broke up, Frank still likes him. CJ is invited too. She tells Mordecai to go without her, because she has a volunteer commitment, and because she trusts him. She says those exact words, "I trust you." Mordecai promises to bring her back a slice of cake. They kiss. He leaves. And what follows is, on the surface, a sitcom comedy of awkwardness. Mordecai ends up on the chopper with Margaret. They laugh. They have a good time. They are, briefly, alone together in a helicopter several hundred feet above the ground. CJ arrives to deliver the cake Mordecai left behind, sees them laughing together, and goes full storm cloud. She rips the helicopter around in hurricane winds. Margaret nearly dies. Frank and Denise almost fall out of the helicopter. Everyone nearly dies. Margaret calms CJ down by revealing that she has a new boyfriend, a weatherman named Del Hanlon. The misunderstanding is cleared up. Everyone survives. And here is where the show does something brutal. It does not let CJ off the hook. The episode ends with CJ in tears, running away, horrified at what she almost did. The show is very clear that this time, the overreaction was hers, that she has a problem, that her jealousy is dangerous. She believed Mordecai when he said he was over Margaret, and when the evidence in front of her seemed to contradict that belief, she snapped. The show is not excusing her, but the show is also not asking the question it should be asking, which is why CJ's jealousy keeps getting triggered in the first place. Why is Margaret always there? Why is Mordecai always ending up alone with her? Why is the pattern repeating, episode after episode, in slightly different configurations? The show hints at it. CJ runs away crying. The damage stays on screen. But Mordecai does not ask himself the question. He will not ask himself the question. The question is the whole game, and if he asks it, he has to answer it. And he cannot answer it, so he will not ask it. That is the behavioral read. That is what he is doing. That is the whole story. In Not Great Double Date, a few episodes later, the love triangle finally gets stated openly. Margaret tells Mordecai and CJ that she lied about having a boyfriend, that Del Hanlon is not actually her boyfriend, that she made him up in the chopper because she needed to calm CJ down, and also because she was tired of feeling like a tourist around her own friends because of the tension. She also confesses, under pressure from CJ asking her directly, that she still has feelings for Mordecai. She says she does not want to act on them. She says she is not going to do anything, but she says them out loud, in the same room as Mordecai and CJ. And the words cannot be unsaid. That is the night CJ goes home, knowing, in a way she did not quite know before, that her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend still loves him. She does not break up with him. She does not storm out. She absorbs it. She keeps going. But something has shifted, and this is where you arrive at Dumped at the Altar, the episode that is the whole point of this video. Because everything that happens in that episode is the accumulated weight of everything I have just described. The hesitation in Season 1. The failure to act fast enough with Margaret in Season 4. The loss in Stake Me Amadeus. The depression in Laundry Woes. The rebound into CJ that was not quite a rebound because she was already his friend. The real relationship that built across Season 5 and most of Season 6. The reappearance of Margaret. The kiss at Christmas. The helicopter. The confession. All of it piling up. Mordecai has been carrying around the unanswered question for months, and the wedding is where the unanswered question finally answers itself, catastrophically, in the worst possible way, in front of the worst possible audience. Dumped at the Altar aired on June 25th, 2015. It is the 28th and final episode of Season 6. It was directed by John Davis Infantino and written by Minty Lewis, Ryan Pequin, and J.G. Quintel. On the surface, the episode is about Muscle Man and Starla getting married. Muscle Man, who has been with Starla since high school, who proposed to her in The End of Muscle Man, who has been slowly becoming one of the show's most emotionally grounded characters, is finally having his wedding day. And Muscle Man, in the middle of preparations, breaks down. He cannot find his father's letter. His father, Muscle Dad, wrote him a letter specifically to read on his wedding day, and Muscle Man has lost it. He will not get married without it. Mordecai and Rigby are dispatched to find it. That is the wedding day plot. Find the letter. Save the wedding. That is what is supposed to be happening in this episode. And underneath that plot, the episode is about Mordecai carrying a secret that he has been carrying for days, maybe weeks, which is that he does not know anymore. He does not know if he wants to be with CJ. He does not know if he wants to be with Margaret. He does not know if he wants to be with either of them. He does not know what he feels. And he is about to attend a wedding where both of them will be present. And he is about to stand up in front of all of his friends and watch someone else commit to someone else. And the contrast between what Muscle Man is doing and what Mordecai is incapable of doing is going to break something inside him that he does not realize is breakable. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The episode opens with wedding preparations. Muscle Man is a wreck. Skips has built an ice sculpture of Muscle Man and Starla together, and Muscle Man, in a fit of emotion, smashes it. Skips has a backup. Starla is acting like a bridezilla, giving ridiculous demands to the park crew and to Eileen, who is helping with the bridesmaid duties. Benson is trying to hold everything together. And in the middle of this, Muscle Man realizes the letter is gone. Mordecai and Rigby are sent to find it. They search the house. They search the trailer. They turn Muscle Man's life upside down, looking for this letter. While they are searching, Rigby reveals, almost offhandedly, that he and Eileen have been dating for months. Mordecai is stunned. Rigby is the one who is supposed to be the mess. Rigby is supposed to be his own failure's best companion. Instead, Rigby has been quietly having a functioning relationship with someone who loves him, and he did not tell Mordecai because he knew Mordecai was already drowning in his own problems, and he did not want to rub it in. Think about that for a second. Rigby, the person Mordecai has been condescending to emotionally for years, has outgrown him. Rigby has what Mordecai is supposed to have. Rigby has the quiet, unremarkable, genuinely happy thing. That is the context in which Mordecai starts asking Rigby for advice. Mordecai is panicking. Mordecai is about to attend a wedding with both women present. Mordecai does not know what he wants. And Rigby, finally, tells him to trust his gut. Go with your gut. Follow what your instinct tells you. Rigby is not giving Mordecai bad advice. Rigby is giving Mordecai the kind of advice that works for Rigby, because Rigby's gut is, at this point, relatively functional. Mordecai's gut, on the other hand, is a disaster. Mordecai's gut is the same gut that spent 4 seasons failing to kiss Margaret. Mordecai's gut is the same gut that pretended he was over her at the Christmas party while kissing her under mistletoe 30 minutes later. Mordecai's gut cannot be trusted. Mordecai's gut is the problem, and Rigby is telling him to listen to it. They find the letter. They bring it to Muscle Man. Muscle Man is incoherent with emotion and asks Mordecai to read it aloud to him so he can hear his father's voice through another person's mouth. Mordecai obliges. And here is where the episode does the thing it has been setting up. The letter from Muscle Dad is a letter about finding the right person, about trusting your instincts, about how when you meet the person you're supposed to be with, you know, and when you are with the wrong person, you also know. And the most important thing is to be honest with yourself about the difference. The letter is beautiful. The letter is heartfelt. The letter is not, in any way, a letter written for Mordecai. It is a letter from a father to a son on the son's wedding day. But Mordecai, reading it aloud, starts to hear it as if it were addressed to him. The words are about Muscle Man and Starla. The words are landing on Mordecai's own chest. By the time Mordecai finishes reading the letter, he is changed. He has decided something. He has listened to his gut, as Rigby told him to, and his gut has told him what it always tells him, which is that he is terrified of being wrong about what he feels, which is that he does not know what he feels, which is that he needs to do something, anything, to resolve the question once and for all. And this is the moment that becomes his worst decision. This is the moment that defines the character for the rest of the series. Because Mordecai, standing in front of a room full of people who came to see his best friend get married, decides that the thing he is going to do right now, in this moment, is honor the letter he just read by being honest. He is going to trust his gut. He is going to say what he actually feels out loud. He is going to stop hiding. And he is going to do it right now. He walks up to the podium. He starts to give a speech, except the speech is not about Muscle Man. The speech is not about Starla. The speech is not about the wedding. The speech is about Mordecai, about his own relationship problems, about how he has not been honest with himself, about how he has been carrying around confusion for months, about how he does not know who his soulmate is. He says those words out loud, in front of everyone, in front of CJ, in front of Margaret, in front of Benson, and Skips and Pops, and Eileen, and High Five Ghost and Thomas and Muscle Mom, and everyone who came. He asks, out loud, if his soulmate is in the room. He gestures vaguely at the audience. He points at random people. He does not point at CJ. He does not point in her direction at all. Sit with that for a moment. Understand what is happening in this scene. His girlfriend is sitting in the third row, in a dress, having arrived on her bicycle because she did not feel like driving to the wedding, having spent the morning getting ready to be there for him, to be his +1 at his best friend's wedding, to be the person he walks in with and leaves with. She is watching her boyfriend stand at a podium asking a room full of strangers whether any of them might be his true soulmate. She is watching him physically turn his body away from her. She is watching him not even look at her. The show does not cut to her reaction much, but when it does, you can see her face moving through confusion, then disbelief, then hurt, then something harder than hurt. Something like the final recognition of a thing she has known for a long time, but has been hoping was not true. That she is watching the man she loves, in front of all their friends, publicly refuse to choose her, in real time, without even the decency of saying her name. Mordecai turns to her. He opens his mouth. The show implies, and the writers have since confirmed, that what he was going to say was that he wanted to break up. That was the gut feeling he was acting on. That was the thing Muscle Dad's letter made him realize. Not that he loved CJ more, not that he loved Margaret more, that he did not want to be in a relationship with either of them, which, if framed gently, in private, in a kind conversation, could have been a respectful end. But he did not do that. He walked up to a podium at his best friend's wedding, in front of both women simultaneously, and prepared to break up with his girlfriend publicly, after first announcing that he did not know who his soulmate was. CJ stands up before he can finish. She stops him. She says, essentially, save it. She knows what he's going to say. And then she says something quieter, sadder, that lands harder than anything in the scene. She says, you do not know who your soulmate is. She is not asking a question. She is stating a fact. She is naming the thing she just saw, and she is grieving it out loud. And then she says the line that has become the most quoted moment of the entire episode. The line that fans of the show still quote 10 years later. The line that made half the fandom furious at Mordecai, and the other half furious at the writers. She says, you did not even point in my direction. That line is the whole scene. That line is the whole relationship. That line is everything the show has been building to for 2 seasons. Because think about what she is saying. She is not angry about the speech. She is not angry about the public humiliation. She is angry, or past angry, because when he asked the question of whether his soulmate was in the room, and he looked around, and he picked strangers at random to gesture at, the one thing he did not do was include her in the list of possibilities. Not as a yes, not even as a maybe. He gestured in every direction except hers, and that, to her, is the answer. That is the clearest possible signal of what he actually thinks of her. It is not that he chose Margaret. It is not that he chose himself. It is that he did not even consider her. She was not, in his mind, a candidate, and she had been his girlfriend for over a year. She pulls the charm bracelet off her wrist. the bracelet he made for her in Real Date. The bracelet with the charms that represented the first day they ever spent together, the activities they did, the shopping cart and the laser gun and the grilled cheese and everything else, welded into a heart because he once took a missile for her. She hands it back to him. She turns around. She runs out of the room. She is crying. Mordecai runs after her. The episode cuts to a later scene where Rigby sees Mordecai and CJ talking outside, in the distance, quietly, at a remove from the wedding. They are seen hugging. CJ gets on her bike and rides away. Mordecai comes back inside. Rigby asks what happened. Mordecai says they are taking a break for a while. The wedding proceeds. Muscle Man and Starla get married. Muscle Man breaks a glass with a cloth over it, which is a traditional Jewish wedding custom that the show has been quietly coding Muscle Man's family toward for a while. Everyone dances. The reception begins. The episode ends. Season 6 ends. But here's the part that makes this Mordecai's worst decision. Here's the part that, on first watch, you might miss, and then on rewatch, hits like a piece of furniture falling on your chest. The break does not end. The show comes back for Season 7. The very first episode, Dumptown, USA, which aired on June 26, 2015, one day after the finale, opens with Mordecai gone. He has been gone for 2 weeks. He has run away to a place called Dumptown, a city populated by men so depressed from breakups that they have physically transformed into slovenly, lethargic versions of themselves. Rigby has to force Eileen to break up with him so he can get transported there. Mordecai has grown a long brown hair and a beard, like Jeff Bridges in The Big Lebowski. He has lost himself completely, and he thinks the whole time, across 2 weeks in Dumpsville, that CJ broke up with him. He grieves it as if she had been the one to leave. He moralizes his own grief. He treats himself as the wounded party. The show does not let him get away with that. Rigby, in the moment where he snaps Mordecai out of it, essentially reminds him of what actually happened. Mordecai was the one who hijacked the wedding. Mordecai was the one who was going to break up with her first. Mordecai's version of events, in which he is the victim, is a lie he is telling himself. And when Mordecai comes back to the park, when he returns to his life, he decides to stop dating for a while. He decides to focus on himself. He does not reach out to CJ. He does not try to rekindle anything. And the show never shows CJ again in any meaningful way. She gets 2 non-speaking cameos after dumped at the altar. That is it. The writers, including head writer Matt Price, would later confirm in interviews that CJ cut off all contact with Mordecai after the wedding, and also with Rigby and Margaret and Eileen. She did not speak to any of them again, not one of them. She walked out of that wedding on her bicycle, and she kept going, out of the show's universe, out of the lives of everyone who was ever associated with Mordecai, and she never came back. That is not a small thing. Let that sit for a second. A character who was in almost 40 episodes of the show. A character voiced by Linda Cardellini, a major actress who showed up to record for years. A character who was the second major girlfriend of one of the 2 leads, who had her own arc, her own family episode with her dad, Carl Putter, in Daddy Issues, her own backstory, her own emotional interior. That character, in the space of 11 minutes, gets written out of the show, permanently, because of a speech, because of a gesture that did not point in her direction, because of a bracelet she could not keep wearing, because Mordecai, in the moment he was supposed to be honest, told the truth so badly, so selfishly, so publicly, that she did not want anything to do with any of the people who were there to watch it. That is the cost of the decision. A person. Gone. Forever. From his life. From his friends' lives. A whole friendship group shattered because one man stood at a podium and talked about himself. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Here is what makes this decision the worst one he ever makes. Not just in romantic terms. Not just in the sense that it ends a specific relationship. In the deeper sense. Because the speech at the wedding is the moment where Mordecai's 2 defining flaws, which the show has been tracking for 6 seasons, finally collide. His indecision and his self-centeredness. These are not the same thing. He is not selfish in the way Rigby is selfish. Rigby is loud and obvious about it. Rigby wants the last slice of pizza and does not pretend otherwise. Mordecai's selfishness is quieter. It is the selfishness of a person who cannot stand to be wrong, who cannot stand to be the one who ends something, who cannot stand to make a choice that might turn out to be the wrong choice. So he does not choose. He waits. He hopes the universe makes the choice for him. And when the universe will not, when the moment finally comes when he has to pick, he picks the option that lets him off the hook, which is to dump the decision on other people, to make it everyone's problem, to say out loud, in front of everyone, I am confused, and to let the room handle the fallout. That is what the speech is. The speech is not honesty. The speech is the abdication of responsibility dressed up as honesty. Because honesty would have been a conversation with CJ in private, weeks earlier, where he said, I am not sure what I want. I need some space. I am sorry. That is what honesty looks like. That is what a grown-up does. What Mordecai did was take the private mess he was carrying and dump it into the middle of his best friend's wedding so that he could say, see, I told the truth. In front of witnesses, you cannot be mad at me. I was being honest. He was using honesty as a weapon against accountability. He was performing vulnerability, so he would not have to feel actual vulnerability. He was breaking up with CJ in a way that, if it had gone right, would have looked like a noble gesture instead of the coward's exit it actually was. That is the gap. That is the whole thing. What Mordecai believes he is doing and what he is actually doing are two completely different things, and the show refuses to resolve that gap for him. The show does not give him a redemption arc. The show does not give him a moment where someone sits him down and explains what he did. He does not get a scene where he writes CJ a letter of apology and she reads it and forgives him. He does not get any of that. He gets Dumptown. He gets 2 weeks of grieving himself. And then he moves on, and the show moves on, and CJ is simply gone. And nobody in the cast brings her up again in any substantive way. The show makes the choice to let the consequence be silence. Nobody checks on her. Nobody asks if she is okay. Nobody calls. She is just not there anymore, and the show goes on without her, and the weight of her absence is never commented on directly. Once you notice that, you cannot unnotice it. The show is telling you something about Mordecai that none of his speeches ever do. It is telling you that even when he loses something important, he does not really understand what he lost. He grieves the feeling of losing. He does not grieve the actual person. There is an episode in season 7 called Just Friends. It aired on November 11th, 2015. It is the episode where Mordecai and Margaret hang out alone for the first time since the wedding. Rigby and Eileen have gone to Rigby's brother Don's black belt ceremony. Mordecai and Margaret end up at a Japanese restaurant, where a chef named Daisuke insists on giving them a free romantic show, even though they tell him they are just friends. At the end of the show, using magical steam, Daisuke shows them their possible future together. If they get back together, they will marry. They will have children. They will buy a houseboat. They will live happily for 50 years and die peacefully. That is the offer. That is the alternate timeline the show is pointedly presenting. And Mordecai and Margaret look at each other, and they both back away from it. Margaret says she is not ready for that. She has a career. She is still young. Mordecai says he has seen enough now, and he is sure of what he wants. And what he wants is for them to just be friends. Think about that scene. Think about what Mordecai is doing. The show has just shown him, in the form of a direct visualization from a magical chef, that the thing he thought he wanted for 4 seasons, the Margaret endgame, is actually available to him if he reaches for it. He would be happy. They would be happy. They would have a good life. And he chooses not to. He walks away. He says he wants to be friends. That is, in isolation, a mature choice. That is the choice of someone who has learned from his mistakes. But put it in context. Put it next to the wedding speech. What is actually happening in Just Friends is that Mordecai, having destroyed his relationship with CJ in pursuit of a truth he did not fully understand, now has the person that truth was presumably about sitting across from him. And when he actually has the chance to pick her, he does not. He does not pick anyone. He picks nothing. He picks the absence of a choice, and he calls it maturity. That is the second half of the revelation. The speech at the wedding was not about Margaret. The speech was about Mordecai. The speech was about his inability to be in a relationship with either woman because both of them would require him to commit to a specific person. And specific persons are what he has been avoiding his entire adult life. Just friends is the confirmation. The alternate future was right there. He could have built the houseboat. He could have had the children. He could have had 50 years. He did not want them. Not because he did not want Margaret. Because he did not want to be the kind of person who chooses someone and then has to live with the choice. Let that sit for a second, because that is not a personality trait. That is a scar. That is what 4 seasons of hesitation and 1 brutal rejection in Stake Me Amadeus and 1 catastrophic public speech at a wedding did to him. He became a person who could not pick, not would not, could not. The muscle was too weak. The habit was too deep. Some part of him had been permanently disabled by the cumulative weight of every small moment where he froze. And by the time Just Friends happens, freezing is the only thing he knows how to do. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a reading of this episode and of the whole arc that says the show was simply being realistic. That relationships in your early 20s end. That not every romantic arc gets a happy ending. That people sometimes make a mess of things, and the mess is not resolved, and everyone moves on with their lives. And that is how life actually works. That reading is not wrong. The writers, especially head writer Matt Price, have said in interviews that they felt the Margaret and CJ story was complete, and both women were on their own paths, and it would not have been honest to give Mordecai either one of them. Matt Price said that Mordecai needed to move on, that he needed to leave the park and pursue art, which he does in the series finale, a regular epic final battle, which aired on January 16th, 2017. That interpretation positions dumped at the altar as a necessary trauma, an engine of growth, a moment of failure that had to happen so that Mordecai could become the person he was going to become. That reading is generous. It might even be correct, but it is incomplete, because the show itself is not generous about this moment. The show makes choices, specifically, to emphasize how badly Mordecai handled this. The choice to have him not point in CJ's direction. The choice to have her give back the bracelet, that specific object, the most loaded possible symbol of their relationship. The choice to have her leave on a bicycle. The choice to cut away from their final conversation and show it only from a distance, silent, so the audience never knows what was said. And the possibility of reconciliation hangs in the air, only to be killed by later interviews. The choice to never bring her back. The choice to have Mordecai, one day later, in Dumptown, be grieving incorrectly. Grieving as if he were the one who was dumped. Grieving in a way that Rigby has to correct. These choices are not neutral. These choices are the show pointing at Mordecai and saying, look at what he did. And then look at what the final episode of the series, a regular epic final battle, does with that pattern. Mordecai, in the epilogue, quits the park. He moves to New York City. He dedicates himself to art. He has an exhibition. He meets a woman at that exhibition. The woman is a Batwoman artist named Steph, who has no speaking lines. Head writer Matt Price later gave her the name Steph in a Reddit discussion because J.G. Quintel, the creator of the show, loves the movie The Goonies, and Steph is a character in The Goonies. Mordecai marries Steph. They have 3 children. They are shown 25 years after the battle with Auntie Pops at a park reunion, looking older. Steph is chatting with Eileen. Their children, 2 sons and 1 daughter, all Blue Jay Bat hybrids, are scattered around. Mordecai looks content. He has a beard. He has glasses. He is wearing a beanie and a red hoodie. He looks like a middle-aged man who has built a life. And here's the thing about Steph that makes the entire arc with Margaret and CJ land with a specific weight. Steph is not Margaret. Steph is not CJ. Steph is a completely new person, introduced in the last 3 minutes of the show, who has no backstory and no personality and no dialogue. The show is not being coy about this. The show is telling you, very directly, that the woman Mordecai ends up with is not someone you met, is not someone you invested in, is not someone whose arc you followed. She is, deliberately, someone else. Someone he meets after leaving everything behind. someone who does not carry the weight of 6 seasons of failed attempts. The show is saying that for Mordecai to actually be in a relationship that works, the relationship has to be fresh, has to be unburdened, has to have no connection to the life he was living when he could not pick. That is harsh. That is deliberately harsh. That is the show closing the door on the idea that Mordecai could have ever made it work with either Margaret or CJ. He could not. He was not capable of it. The damage was too deep, and the only way forward was away, out of town, out of the park, into a new city with new people and a new job, where he could start over and become the person he was supposed to have been, on a timeline that did not include the women he had already failed. You can read that as hopeful. You can read it as the show saying, people change, people grow. Even characters as broken as Mordecai can become functional adults if they are willing to leave behind the versions of themselves that did the damage. That is one reading. It is a real reading. It is probably the reading the writers intended, but there is another reading underneath that one, and it is harder to sit with. It is the reading that says Mordecai never really faced what he did. That dumped at the altar was his worst decision, and he did not process it. He did not atone for it. He did not make amends. He did not even really think about it honestly. He left. He went to New York. He made art. He met someone new. He moved on. And CJ, somewhere, off-screen, became a professional dodgeball player, according to a Reddit comment by Matt Price, and never spoke to any of them again. She did not get closure either. She just got out. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Think about what it means to be CJ after dumped at the altar. You loved someone. You gave them a year of your life. You forgave them for the Christmas kiss because you believed him when he said he was over Margaret. You forgave him again after the helicopter because you knew you had overreacted. You went to his best friend's wedding on your bicycle because you wanted to support him. You sat in the 3rd row in a dress you picked out specifically for this. You watched him stand at a podium and talk about his love life in front of everyone. You watched him not even look in your direction. You handed him back a bracelet you had been wearing for a year. You walked out of the church. You got on your bicycle. You rode away, and you made a decision. You decided that you were done, not just with him, with all of them. With Rigby, who had been his accomplice in failing to realize what was happening. With Eileen, who had hosted the Christmas party where the first kiss with Margaret happened. With Margaret, who had lingered in their lives for a year after coming back from college. Who had kissed him under mistletoe. Who had confessed her feelings in front of you. You decided that the entire infrastructure of your romantic life with Mordecai was contaminated, and you chose to simply stop being in contact with any of it. You packed up your half of the shared friendship. You left. That is a decision that requires enormous self-respect. That is a decision that, in a better told version of this story, would have been given an episode, an arc, a goodbye. CJ never gets that. CJ gets 2 non-speaking cameos in the rest of the series. That is it. Her exit is total. Her exit is silent. The show does not honor her departure with any narrative weight. It just lets her go. And in the interview afterward, the writers confirm that yes, she left, and no, she never came back. She showed up at the wedding, she left the wedding, and she was effectively done with the show. Now think about what it means to be Mordecai after dumped at the altar, inside the logic of the show itself, in the episodes that follow. Dumptown happens. Mordecai grieves himself. Rigby drags him back. He decides to stop dating. Then, across the rest of Season 7 and into Season 8, he slowly starts to heal. He draws more. He pursues art. There is an episode in Season 8 where he takes art classes. There are hints that he is figuring out what he actually wants to do with his life, which is something he has not been able to think about for years because he was too busy being paralyzed by his love life. The wedding speech, horrifically, was good for him. It broke something open. It made him stop avoiding himself. It forced him to look at what he was, which was a person who could not commit. And because he could not commit, he could not build. And because he could not build, his entire life was going to be reactive. A response to what was happening to him rather than a thing he created. And that is the gift, I guess, of the worst decision. It was so bad. It was so undeniable that he could not lie about it anymore. He could not pretend he was the shy guy who was trying to figure it out. He was a 30-year-old Blue Jay who had just hijacked his best friend's wedding to talk about himself, and then ran away to a town for depressed men, and had to be rescued by his best friend, who had meanwhile quietly built a relationship with the woman he had once been considering a rebound option. The contrast was too stark. The mirror was too clean. Mordecai could not look away anymore, and the thing he saw in the mirror was someone he did not want to be. So he started, slowly, across 2 more seasons, to become someone else. And by the time the show ends, he has. He has quit the park. He has left town. He has built a career around a thing he is actually good at, which is drawing. He has met someone who does not come with the baggage. He has children. He has a life. But that life exists on top of a grave. The grave of his relationship with CJ. A relationship that never, in the show's accounting, got a proper burial. A relationship that ended in front of a crowd and then simply stopped existing in the narrative. The only object that remains of it is the bracelet, which CJ handed back at the wedding, which Mordecai presumably still has somewhere, or threw out, or buried in a drawer and tried to forget. The show does not tell us what happens to the bracelet. The show does not tell us if he ever thinks about her. The show does not show him processing what he did to her. It shows him processing his own sadness. It shows him leaving town. It shows him finding a new life. And the absence of any direct acknowledgement of the damage he caused is itself the most damning thing about him. He does the thing, and then he moves on. And he does not really understand, in a way that he is forced to articulate, what it cost. The behavioral read on Mordecai across the entire show is that he is a person who feels his own pain much more vividly than he feels anyone else's. He can grieve himself for 2 weeks in Dumptown. He cannot seem to grieve CJ at all. He can imagine alternate futures with Margaret and just friends, and feel a kind of melancholy about letting them go. But he cannot seem to sit with the alternate future where CJ is still his girlfriend, where he handled things better, where she did not have to ride away on a bicycle in tears. That story does not exist in his head. The story in his head is a story about himself. The story in his head is a story about his journey. CJ was a chapter in it. She was not the author of her own story, in his mind. And the show, by never showing us him coming to terms with that, preserves the indictment. This is what I mean when I say, dumped at the altar is his worst decision. Not because it ended a relationship. Relationships end. Not because it was public. Some painful moments are public. It is his worst decision because it was the moment where every weakness in his character got activated simultaneously, and none of the strengths in his character, which the show has also been carefully tracking, showed up to balance them. The Mordecai who, in Meteor Moves, summoned the courage to tell the guardian of the friend zone that he had wanted to kiss Margaret for a long time, was absent from that podium. The Mordecai who in Real Date took a missile for CJ was absent from that podium. The Mordecai who helped Skips. The Mordecai who stood by Rigby through 1,000 bad decisions. The Mordecai who in Exit 9B gave a small speech to the park crew about standing up for the park. All the versions of him that were capable of courage, capable of sacrifice, capable of putting someone else first, were not present when he walked up to that podium. Only the worst version showed up. Only the version of him that has existed since he was a kid in the coffee shop, hoping Margaret would speak first, hoping the universe would resolve the question for him, hoping he would never have to be the one who chose. And you can see, across the whole scene, the show illustrating this with extraordinary care. The way Mordecai does not look at anyone. The way his voice gets faster as he talks. The way he starts out seeming to have something specific to say, and ends up talking in circles. The way his hands move. The way, when he finally turns to CJ, he does so with his body angled slightly away from her, as if he is already pulling back from what he is about to do. The show is not being subtle about what it is doing here. The show is telling you that this person, in this moment, is losing the capacity for specific action in real time. His gut is not telling him anything. His gut is a static sound. He is running on the fumes of Muscle Dad's letter, a letter that was not written for him. And he is confusing the warmth of that letter with clarity, when what he is actually experiencing is the last stages of a panic attack that started when Margaret kissed him in Merry Christmas Mordecai 6 months ago and never quite stopped. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a version of Mordecai that the show has never shown you directly. A version where he walked into the wedding, watched Muscle Man and Starla get married, gave a toast that was about them, enjoyed the reception with CJ on his arm, and then, 2 weeks later, had a private conversation with her in her apartment and said, "I am not sure what I want right now, and I think we need to take some time, and I am sorry." That Mordecai exists in the logical space of the show. That Mordecai is one small decision removed from the Mordecai we got. That Mordecai would have broken CJ's heart in private, and she would have cried, and she would have been sad, but she would not have left the friend group. She would not have cut off Eileen and Margaret. She would have gone through a painful season, and then she would have come back, and over time, she and Mordecai might have been able to be friends again, the way Mordecai and Margaret eventually were friends. The show hints at the existence of that alternate timeline, and then closes the door on it, because the version of Mordecai who could have made that private conversation happen did not exist. He was not capable of it. His muscles for that specific act of courage had atrophied. He had spent so many years not having difficult conversations that when the moment came to have one, he chose a podium at a wedding instead. The show has never been explicit about this, but regular show has always been a show about labor, about the daily work of being an adult, about keeping a job, paying rent, maintaining friendships, showing up. Mordecai and Rigby are groundskeepers. They are minimum wage employees. The show treats their jobs with both comedy and seriousness. Benson, their boss, is a strict manager because the show takes his role as a manager seriously. The work matters. The showing up matters. And relationships, in the show's logic, are also work. They are things you do every day, not things that happen to you. They require the same kind of maintenance as a park. You have to mow them. You have to water them. You have to show up even when you do not feel like it. Mordecai, across his entire romantic life, has been a bad groundskeeper of his own relationships. He has let the grass grow. He has let the benches rot. He has put off maintenance that would have been easy if he had done it in time, and has ended up with emergencies that require massive interventions. The Christmas kiss is an emergency he did not prevent. The helicopter incident is an emergency he did not prevent. The speech at the wedding is what happens when all the deferred maintenance finally collapses into a single catastrophic failure. And here's the hardest part. Here's the thing the show wants you to understand, but will not explicitly say. Mordecai did not want to be a good groundskeeper of his own relationships, because being good at that work would have required him to know what he wanted. And he did not want to know what he wanted, because once you know what you want, you can fail to get it. As long as you do not know, you cannot lose. That is the whole architecture of Mordecai's psychology. That is the load-bearing wall. He keeps his desires vague, so he cannot be disappointed. He keeps his commitments soft, so he cannot be betrayed. He keeps his feelings private, so he cannot be rejected. And the cost of that architecture is that he also cannot be known. He cannot be fully seen. He cannot be fully loved. Because the person he is presenting to the world is a person who is always slightly somewhere else, always about to make up his mind, always not quite sure, and you cannot love a person who is not there. CJ was trying to love him. CJ was actually trying, and he was not there enough to receive it. That is why she handed back the bracelet. That is the deepest reason. Not because of the speech, not because of the not pointing. Those were symptoms. The deeper disease was that she had spent a year in a relationship with a person who was not fully in the room with her. And at a certain point, the cost of keeping the door open for a person who will not walk through it becomes unbearable. And you close the door, and you lock it, and you go home, and you start the rest of your life. That is Mordecai's worst decision. Not just the speech. The whole pattern of not being there. The speech was the final expression of it. The speech was the moment where a year of absence became visible to everyone in the room, including the woman he had been absent from, and she could not keep pretending she did not notice. The speech was, in a sense, a relief. It let her finally stop hoping. It let her finally stop making excuses for him. It let her finally see that the version of Mordecai she had been dating was mostly a projection, a collaboration between his actual self and her own hopeful reading of him. And the actual self, on display at the podium, was not a person she wanted to spend her life with. So she did not. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a scene earlier in Season 6, in I See Turtles, which is the 15th episode of the season, where CJ has a conversation with Mordecai about Margaret. It happens after the Christmas kiss. It happens before the full hurricane of events that will come later. CJ confides in Mordecai about how she feels about Margaret. She tells him that she does not want Eileen to feel caught in the middle, but that she cannot handle being around Margaret yet, because she is still hurt by what Mordecai and Margaret did. That is the important sentence. What you and Margaret did. She is naming it as something that was done to her, not as an accident, as a thing that happened because of choices. And Mordecai, in that conversation, does not really respond in a way that grapples with what she is saying. He agrees. He nods. He supports her. But he does not say, "I am sorry for what I did, and I am going to work on making sure it never happens again. And here are the specific things I am going to do." He does not do the work. He just gets the conversation over with and moves on. That pattern, over and over, across Season 6, is the slow erosion of the relationship. Each conversation is a conversation Mordecai does not fully have. Each apology is an apology he does not fully mean. Each promise is a promise he does not fully keep. That is the accumulation. That is what makes the wedding speech the endpoint of a long decline rather than a single bad day. If it had been a single bad day, you could forgive it. You could say, everyone panics sometimes. Everyone says the wrong thing at the wrong time. But the show has spent a year showing you that this is not a single bad day. This is the compounding of dozens of small moments where Mordecai did not quite show up, did not quite apologize, did not quite commit. And the wedding is the bill coming due. Let us spend a little more time with the specific texture of the speech itself. Because the speech is a masterclass in how a character can make himself look worse with every sentence. It begins, charmingly, as an extension of the letter he has just read. Muscle Dad's letter, which was about finding the right person and being honest with yourself. And Mordecai starts by saying something about how important those ideas are. That is the frame. That is how he begins. He has just read a beautiful letter, and he wants to honor it by being equally honest. Nobody in the room, at the moment he begins, has any reason to think this will go badly. The audience assumes he is going to say something nice about Muscle Man. They assume the speech will be a toast. They are wrong. Because Mordecai, within 30 seconds, pivots from Muscle Dad's letter to his own life. He starts talking about how he has been struggling. He starts talking about how he has not been honest with himself or others. He starts unpacking his own romantic confusion in front of a room full of people who came to celebrate someone else's love. And you can see, if you watch the scene carefully, the way Rigby's face changes. Rigby has been the architect of the go with your gut advice. Rigby has been the one telling Mordecai to trust his instincts. And Rigby, watching this, realizes in real time that Mordecai has interpreted his advice in a way Rigby did not intend. Rigby later asks him, directly, whether go with your gut meant completely losing his mind and trying to dump his girlfriend at a wedding. And Mordecai admits that he is not good with this stuff. That admission happens after the fact. In the moment, Rigby cannot do anything. Rigby is not close enough to the podium. Rigby is watching his best friend implode in front of everyone they know. And Rigby cannot intervene without making it worse. So Rigby just watches. The speech keeps going. Mordecai starts talking about soulmates. He starts asking, out loud, whether he has one. He starts asking whether his soulmate is in the room. He scans the audience. He points at people. He points at random audience members. He points, specifically, at strangers, at guests of Muscle Man's family, at people he does not really know. He does not point at Margaret, who is there. He does not point at CJ, who is also there. He points at the crowd, like a raffle host trying to pick a winner. And the specificity of who he does not point at is what makes the moment unbearable. Because a person who was confused, a person who genuinely did not know, would have gestured at both women, would have said, maybe her, I do not know. That would have been honest confusion. What Mordecai does instead is carefully avoid pointing at both of them, which is its own kind of answer. You do not avoid pointing at someone unless, on some level, you have already decided they are not the answer. He has already decided. He does not know he has decided. He does not know what the decision is, but his body knows. His body is already executing the breakup. His mouth is the last part to catch up. And then, as he turns towards CJ, his body language finally aligns with the words. He faces her. He stops looking at the audience. He is about to say the thing. He is about to break up with her. You can see it coming. The entire room can see it coming. CJ can see it coming. And that is why she stops him. Not because she does not want to hear it, because she already knows. She already knows what he's going to say, because she has been watching the speech. And the speech has been telling her. And so she stands up and she cuts him off and she says, "Save it." She does not need him to finish the sentence. She is not going to give him the gift of completing it. She is going to finish it for herself, in her own way, which is to hand back the bracelet and leave. The speech does not get to end on his terms. It ends on hers. And that is the only small mercy in the whole scene. That CJ, at the very last moment, is the one who names what is happening. That she gets the last word. That she does not let him control the rhythm of his own breakup. She takes that from him. She deserves at least that much. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. One of the questions fans have debated for years about this episode is whether CJ was justified in assuming the worst, whether she should have let Mordecai finish, whether if she had simply listened, the whole thing could have been averted. That debate misunderstands what the episode is doing. The episode is not asking whether CJ should have listened. The episode is telling you, through her behavior, that she did listen. She listened for a year. She listened through the Christmas kiss. She listened through the helicopter. She listened through Margaret's confession of her feelings at the double date. She listened through every small moment where Mordecai did not quite commit. And by the time he got to the podium and started his speech, she had listened enough. She did not need more data. The data was overwhelming. The only question left was the manner of the ending. And when she saw the shape of the speech, she understood that Mordecai was going to make her sit through him, explaining why he could not be with her in front of all of their friends. And she decided that she was not going to give him that. She cut it off. That is not an overreaction. That is a woman finally setting a limit on what she is willing to endure. That is her taking control of the one thing she can still control, which is how the ending of this relationship looks. She does not get to control whether it ends. She gets to control how she exits. And she exits with dignity. She exits with the bracelet in his hand and the last word on her side. The Mordecai and CJ relationship ends on her terms. That is actually important to notice. In a show that spent 6 seasons letting Mordecai's cowardice set the pace of everything in his romantic life, the very last moment of his most significant relationship gets seized by the woman he has wronged, and she walks out on her own timing. That is the show, one last time, telling you that Mordecai is not the architect of his own story. He is the person it is happening to, and the people around him are, again and again, the ones who have to make the actual decisions that carry his life forward. Rigby dragged him out of Dumptown. Benson kept him from getting fired. CJ ended their relationship when Mordecai could not find the words to do it himself. He is always being shepherded through his own life by people who are more functional than he is. And the wedding speech was the moment where that fact became impossible to hide, because it was the first time in the show where the person doing the shepherding was the one he had hurt. There is a scene, a quiet one, after Mordecai runs after CJ out of the church. The camera stays inside for a long time. Muscle Man is in the middle of his wedding vows. Nobody in the audience seems to be paying much attention because everyone is still processing what Mordecai just did. Benson is furious. Skips is stoic. Pops is confused. Starla is somehow both annoyed and still proceeding with her wedding because she has waited too long for this day to let Mordecai derail it completely. The wedding, remarkably, continues. Muscle Man and Starla get married. The show, in a quick cut, shows them actually exchanging vows, actually kissing, actually becoming husband and wife, while Mordecai is outside doing his last conversation with CJ. Think about the parallel the show is constructing. Inside the building, two people are making a public commitment to be together. Outside the building, two people are making a private acknowledgement that they cannot be together. Both things are happening at the same time. The show is showing you the contrast deliberately. This is what commitment looks like. This is what failure to commit looks like. Both outcomes are present in the same episode, in the same frame, at the same moment. Rigby walks outside and finds Mordecai alone. CJ has already gotten on her bicycle and left. Rigby asks what happened. Mordecai tells him they are taking a break for a while. Rigby, to his credit, does not rub it in. Rigby does not gloat. Rigby does not say, "I told you to trust your gut, but maybe not like that." Rigby just stands there with his friend, who has just had the worst moment of his adult life, and they exist together in that moment. And then they go back inside to the reception. Because life does. Because the wedding is still happening. Because Muscle Man and Starla are still getting married. Because the show, in its wisdom, understands that catastrophic personal moments do not actually stop the world from moving. The world keeps going. You have to keep going with it. That is the bleak, slightly comforting truth at the center of the episode. Mordecai has done something terrible, and the world has not ended. The reception is still going. The food is still being served. The wedding has still happened. Life continues. He will have to figure out how to continue with it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. When you step back and look at the whole shape of Mordecai's arc across the series, you start to see what the wedding speech actually means in the larger pattern. Because the show is doing something with Mordecai that it never quite does with any of the other main characters. It is letting him fail, publicly and expensively, and it is not rescuing him. Think about Rigby. Rigby fails constantly, but Rigby is given the structural safety net of Eileen, who loves him unconditionally across several seasons, and who eventually, by dumped at the altar itself, is revealed to be his girlfriend. Rigby ends up in a stable relationship with a woman who has been quietly building toward him for years. Muscle Man, who begins the show as a gross, obnoxious background joke, slowly becomes a person who proposes to his girlfriend, weeps about his dead father, and gets married in a ceremony that his friends help him survive. Skips, the immortal Yeti voiced by Mark Hamill, has his own deep backstory involving an eternal lost love, and the show honors that. Pops, the lollipop-headed son of the park owner, becomes, in the end, the savior of the universe. Benson gets back together with Pam. High Five Ghost, who barely speaks for the first 3 seasons, ends up with Celia, a human woman he met at a cafe, and they tour the world together as a DJ duo. Every single main character gets a functional romantic ending except one, Mordecai. And Mordecai's ending is functional in a technical sense. He ends up with Steph. He has children. But the show does not let you watch him earn that ending. The show does not show him doing the work. The show skips straight from dumped at the altar, through 2 more seasons of Mordecai essentially figuring out how to be a person, to an art exhibition, 25 years in the future, where a Batwoman with no name and no personality becomes his wife. You do not get to watch him recover. You do not get to watch him apologize. You do not get to watch him become the kind of person who would not have given that speech. That has to happen off-screen. The show, in its ending, essentially trusts that he will do the work eventually, and jumps ahead to the result. Whether that trust is earned is a matter of opinion. Some fans think it is a cop-out. Some fans think it is honest, because real growth happens over years and cannot be dramatized in a sitcom. But either way, the wedding speech remains the last time the show shows Mordecai at his worst. And it shows him at his worst in a way that cannot be undone. The consequences are permanent. CJ is gone. The friend group is fractured. The emotional furniture of the show has been rearranged, and the new configuration does not include her. That permanence is the key to understanding why this is his worst decision. Regular Show, as a show, has a deep fondness for the reset button. Episodes end, and the park returns to normal. Consequences evaporate. Benson's car gets wrecked again, and again, and again, and nothing is ever really lost. The reset is part of the genre. Cartoons are allowed to erase their damage, but Dumped at the Altar breaks that rule. The damage does not reset. CJ does not come back. The friendship does not come back. The show goes on without her, in a universe that is now permanently missing a character who was in 39 episodes. That is a rare choice for an animated sitcom. That is a choice the show makes specifically to emphasize how serious the moment was. It is the show telling you, very clearly, that this cannot be undone, that some damage is permanent, that some people, once you push them away badly enough, do not come back. And the rest of the series, every moment from that point forward, is colored by her absence. The scenes where Mordecai hangs out with Eileen and Margaret and Rigby always have a fourth chair that is not there. The scenes where the group watches TV together always have someone missing on the couch. The show does not point at this. The show does not comment on it, but it is there, in the margins, every time you look. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. One of the things that makes the wedding speech especially painful, on rewatch, is the specific timeline. Mordecai and CJ had been together, functionally, from the end of Season 5 through most of Season 6. That is over a year in showtime, though it is harder to say how much time passes in universe, because the show is not always precise about its own chronology. But it is long enough that she has become part of the group. It is long enough that Eileen and Rigby have double dated with them. It is long enough that her family has been introduced. It is long enough that Christmas happened with her in the picture. It is long enough that she had keys to Mordecai's life in ways that suggest real intimacy. And Mordecai, across that entire year, has been carrying around an unresolved question about Margaret. Not a fresh question. Not a question that emerged at Christmas. A question that predates CJ entirely. A question that has been the animating principle of his romantic life for 4 seasons before CJ even became a serious presence in his life. He entered the relationship with CJ with the question not fully closed. He never closed it. He let it sit. And the question sat there, like an unmade bed in the corner of the room, for 12 plus months, until the wedding, when it finally stood up and introduced itself to everyone. The adult thing to have done would have been to address the question before starting a relationship with CJ in the first place. To sit with himself in the aftermath of Stake Me Amadeus, in the depression of laundry woes, and to really understand that Margaret was not coming back in the way he had imagined, that what had happened was final, that he needed to grieve the specific version of the future he had wanted, and then let it go. That work, the grief work, never happened. He distracted himself with CJ instead. And CJ, who deserved a whole person, got a distracted person. And she did not know she was getting a distracted person, because he was not even fully aware he was a distracted person. He thought he had moved on. He had convinced himself. And the Christmas kiss with Margaret, under the mistletoe, in front of the Carl Sagan picture, was the moment the self-deception started to break. Think about the Christmas kiss for a moment. Really sit with what happened there. He was talking to Margaret about how he had moved on. He was telling her, in words, that he was happy with CJ. And in the middle of saying that, he began to mentally flash back through every kiss they had ever shared. Picking up Margaret. Meteor moves. Every good memory. And when the flashback ended, his body had already leaned in, and his lips were on hers. The show is telling you, with that scene, that his words and his body were in 2 different places. His mouth was telling Margaret he had moved on. His body was kissing her. Those 2 things cannot both be true. One of them was a lie. And the one that was a lie was the mouth, which means that for 6 months, from that Christmas all the way to the wedding in June, Mordecai was in a relationship with CJ, while his body was still secretly in love with Margaret. And he was aware of this on some level, and he did nothing about it. And he told CJ he loved her, and he meant it. But he was also something else. And that something else was the toxin that poisoned everything that came after. That is not a small thing. Let that sit for a second. Mordecai was not lying to CJ in the gross way. He was not sneaking around. He was not cheating. He was, in fact, being a reasonably good boyfriend on the level of daily behavior. What he was doing was much worse in a specific sense, because it was harder to name. He was running a relationship with CJ while leasing storage space in his heart to a person who was technically his ex. And every so often, the storage facility would glitch, and some of the contents would spill out, and an accident would happen, and he would promise it was an accident, and CJ would forgive him, because she had no choice but to forgive him, or end the relationship, and the cycle would restart until the wedding, where it finally broke. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. You might be wondering why this particular wedding of these particular characters was the specific catalyst. Why Muscle Man? Why Starla? Why that letter from Muscle Dad specifically? And the answer is not arbitrary. The show chose those specific elements for a reason. Muscle Man, across the series, has been the character who most visibly overcame his own worst traits to become someone capable of love. He started as a walking insult. He literally introduced himself by saying, "My mom." He was obnoxious. He was ugly. He was gross. And over 8 seasons, he slowly, painstakingly became someone capable of holding himself together for another person. Starla, despite being a character who also started as a joke, became a person he loved. They stayed together. They built something. Muscle Man is the counterexample to Mordecai. Muscle Man is the person who was supposed to fail at love and did not. And Mordecai, watching his friend who started with fewer advantages build a more functional relationship, is in a position of particular pressure. The comparison is painful. The comparison is personal. Every time Muscle Man does something emotionally mature, Mordecai feels the contrast, even if he cannot name it. Then there is the letter. Muscle Dad is dead, and has been for a while, and the letter is the only way he can be present at his son's wedding. A father reaching across death to tell his son, trust your gut, find the right person, be honest with yourself. That letter carries enormous emotional weight. When Mordecai reads it aloud, he is channeling the voice of a dead father, giving advice to his son on his son's wedding day. The words are not abstractions. They are the voice of someone who has thought about mortality and love and chosen to speak clearly. And Mordecai, standing in front of the microphone, gets overwhelmed by the weight of those words. He starts to believe, wrongly, that the letter is speaking to him too, that the advice is universal, that he needs to go be honest, right now, in front of everyone. That is why the speech happens. Not because Mordecai is stupid, because Mordecai has been carrying around a crushing question for months. And the letter, beautiful as it is, cracks him open, and the mess inside him pours out in the wrong direction. There is a version of the episode where Mordecai, after reading the letter, takes a breath, sits down, and applauds for his best friend. That version is one good choice away from the version we got. The distance between those two versions is the distance between the worst decision of Mordecai's life and one of the better ones. And the fact that the distance is so small that a single breath could have prevented all of it is part of what makes the episode so quietly devastating. Mordecai was one pause away from saving everything. He did not take the pause. He trusted his gut, as Rigby told him to. His gut sent him to the podium. His gut told him to speak. His gut was wrong, catastrophically wrong, permanently wrong. Think about what that teaches about the nature of Mordecai's character. His gut is not a reliable signal, because his gut has been shaped by years of avoidance. When your gut's default setting is, do not commit, then listening to your gut will tell you not to commit, even when the thing your gut is telling you not to commit to is a relationship that is actually good for you. Rigby's gut works because Rigby's gut is, for all its chaos, generally oriented toward whatever feels good in the moment. Rigby's gut told him to date Eileen, and he did, and it was a good decision. Mordecai's gut is a different animal. Mordecai's gut is haunted. Mordecai's gut has been marinating in hesitation for years. When Mordecai listens to his gut, he is listening to the accumulated weight of every time he did not act. And the accumulated weight, at the moment of the wedding, told him to break up with CJ, because breaking up with her was the path that involved him making no commitment to anyone, which is the path his gut has always preferred. That is a heavy realization. That is the Mordecai you have been watching for 6 seasons, revealed in a single scene. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What does the show do with Mordecai after this? It puts him in Dumptown, as I mentioned, where he has to be rescued by Rigby. Then, across season 7, it slowly shifts his focus away from romance. He does not date seriously again in the remaining 2 seasons. He has small crushes. He has awkward moments. But the show, deliberately, takes the romance plot out of his story and replaces it with other things. His relationship with Rigby deepens. They go through a number of large-scale sci-fi adventures, including an entire season in space. They fight an evil, godlike version of Pops. They experience time loops, identity crises, existential threats to the park and the universe. And through all of that, Mordecai is not a romantic lead. He is a friend. He is a partner in the adventures. He is a person with a job who has stopped making his relationships the center of his identity. And that change, subtle as it is the show's way of saying that something did heal, eventually. That some lesson was absorbed. That the worst decision did break him. But in breaking him, it also forced him to stop running the bad program that had been running in the background of his life. He stopped waiting. He stopped hoping. He started doing. And by the time we get to the finale, and to Steph in the epilogue, the show has earned its time jump. Mordecai has, over years, become someone who could meet a stranger at an art exhibition and follow up on the connection. That is not nothing. That is a real growth. But the growth was bought at a terrible price. The price was CJ. The price was the friendship group as it had existed. The price was any version of Mordecai's adult life that included the people he had loved in his 20s. He had to leave town. He had to leave the park. He had to start over. Because the old version of his life was permanently broken by what he did at that wedding. And the only way forward was through the rupture. That is, in its own grim way, a kind of hope. Because it suggests that even the worst decisions are survivable. That you can do something terrible to someone you love in front of everyone you know, and still, somehow, against all odds, build a life afterward. That life will not look the way you thought it would look. It will not include the people you thought it would include, but it will exist. You will get to have a future, even if you do not deserve the future you wanted. And the people you hurt, the CJs of your life, will also get to have futures. They will not be in your future, but they will have theirs. She became a professional dodgeball player, according to a Reddit comment by Matt Price. She is out there, somewhere, playing dodgeball, living her life, not thinking about Mordecai. That is her ending. That is the ending she deserved. She earned it by leaving. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Let us return, one more time, to the specific image that opens this video. The image of Mordecai at the podium. The image of the bird in the rented tuxedo. The girlfriend in the third row. The bracelet in his hand. Because that image, above all the other images the show ever produced, is the one that encapsulates Mordecai as a character. It is the image that, if you had to boil his entire arc down to a single frame, you would pick. Not a frame from his wedding to Steph, which we barely see. Not a frame from his art exhibition, which is also brief. Not a frame of him kissing Margaret and picking up Margaret, which is the romantic peak. The iconic Mordecai frame is the one of him not pointing. The one where he is scanning the audience, and his hand is not going in the direction of the woman he is supposed to love. The one where his absence is finally visible. That is him. That is the heart of him. And the show, by making that the visual climax of his entire romantic arc, is telling you what it has been trying to tell you all along. That Mordecai's problem was never Margaret. Mordecai's problem was never CJ. Mordecai's problem was always Mordecai. His inability to be present, his inability to pick, his inability to commit, his habit of keeping every option open so that he could never be wrong, at the cost of never being right. And the tragedy is that he did not know. He spent the whole speech thinking he was being brave. He walked up to the podium thinking he was taking Muscle Dad's advice. He believed, in the moment, that he was honoring the letter. He was performing honesty. He was performing integrity. He was performing growth. And what he was actually doing was the opposite of all of those things. He was hiding behind the letter. He was using the letter as cover to do something he did not have the courage to do in private. He was leveraging someone else's dead father to break up with his girlfriend so he would not have to look her in the eye and do it alone. That is not what Muscle Dad's letter was about. That is not what trust your gut means. That is the exact opposite of what the letter was saying. Because the letter was saying, be honest with the person you love. And Mordecai, at that podium, was not being honest with CJ. He was being honest about CJ to a room full of strangers, which is not honesty at all. That is gossip. That is performance. That is the cheap imitation of honesty that costs nothing and destroys everything. That is the deepest cut of the whole episode. The fact that Mordecai misunderstood the letter he was reading, that he read a letter about courage and mistook it for permission to be a coward in public, that he read a letter about choosing the right person and turned it into a reason to not choose anyone. The letter was the opposite of what he did with it. And that is not a small failure of interpretation. That is the failure of a person who, at a fundamental level, does not know what courage means, who has mistaken, for his entire life, the performance of feelings for the having of feelings, who has confused the word honest with the word loud, who has thought that if you say something in public, it must be true, when the opposite is more often the case, because the easiest place to perform a truth is in front of an audience who is not the person most affected by it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This is the heart of Mordecai's worst decision, not the act itself, the self-deception around the act, the conviction that he was doing the brave thing when he was doing the opposite, the belief that he was being honest, when he was using the appearance of honesty as a shield against the responsibility for actual honesty. Because actual honesty would have required him to go to CJ in her apartment, without an audience, and say the words out loud to her alone. And he did not want to say them to her alone. He wanted witnesses. He wanted a structure. He wanted Muscle Dad's letter, and his best friend's wedding, and a podium, and a microphone, and a room full of people who would, by their presence, validate his difficult speech as an act of bravery. He needed the external scaffolding because he did not trust himself to do it without. And that need for scaffolding is the sign that he was not ready. A person who is ready to break up with their partner does not need a wedding to do it. A person who is ready does it on a Tuesday evening, quietly, in a kitchen, with a glass of water on the counter and no one watching. That is what bravery looks like. It is small. It is undramatic. It is intimate. And Mordecai, because he was not brave enough to be small, was dramatic instead. There is a specific weight to the fact that Mordecai's worst decision happens at a wedding, because weddings, in the structural logic of any story, are always about commitment. A wedding is the ceremony where two people publicly promise to choose each other every day for the rest of their lives. It is the ritual opposite of what Mordecai is doing. While Muscle Man and Starla are about to promise to choose each other, Mordecai is standing at their podium, promising to choose himself. He is, literally, using their commitment ceremony to announce his own non-commitment. The juxtaposition is not accidental. The writers put him at a wedding on purpose. They wanted you to see the contrast. They wanted you to understand that Mordecai is, in this moment, doing the exact negative image thing of what the ceremony is about. And the other attendees, on some level, understand this too. Benson is furious, not because Mordecai is being dramatic, but because Mordecai is desecrating the structure of the wedding by using it as a personal confessional. Skewed Priorities is the official name for it on the TV Tropes page. Muscle Man and Starla, remarkably, are more annoyed than hurt because they want to start the fryers and serve dinner. But the core violation is real. Mordecai has used someone else's wedding as his own stage. And that is a very specific kind of offense. That is the offense of a person who cannot tell whose story is whose. That inability is the seed of the whole problem. Mordecai cannot tell when he is the main character, and when he is a supporting character. At Muscle Man's wedding, he is a guest. He is not the main character. He is not supposed to be at the center of anything. His job at that wedding is to be a body in a chair, to clap at the right moments, to smile at the happy couple, to have a good time with his girlfriend, and to not take up space. He fails at this. He takes up enormous space. He centers himself in an event that was not about him. And that is the same behavior, scaled up, as every moment in his romantic life where he has put his own feelings at the center of a situation where someone else's feelings should have mattered. He does it with Margaret. He does it with CJ. He does it with his friends. He is perpetually the protagonist of his own drama. And he cannot seem to remember that other people are the protagonists of theirs. At the wedding, that failure becomes public and enormous. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And that, finally, is the reason Dumped at the Altar is Mordecai's worst decision. Not because it ended a relationship, not because it was embarrassing, because it was, in its structure, the fullest possible expression of his central flaw, his inability to be a supporting character. His insistence on being always at the middle of the frame. CJ was a girlfriend. Margaret was an ex. Muscle Man was a friend getting married. And instead of allowing any of those people their own rightful place in the story, Mordecai pulled the camera to himself and tried to make the whole room be about his own confusion. That is the worst decision, because it is, in compressed form, every bad decision he has ever made. It is him, finally, doing on a public stage what he has been doing in private for 6 seasons. And the public stage makes it undeniable. You cannot hide behind small moments anymore. You cannot explain it away with a shrug. It is there, on camera, in front of all his friends, and he did it, and he cannot take it back. The show does not give him a second chance with CJ. That is the show's judgment. That is the show's verdict. The writers could have, at any point in the next 2 seasons, brought CJ back. They could have written an episode where she returns to town, and they have a conversation, and they do not get back together. But at least she says her piece, and he says his, and there is closure. They did not do that. They made the deliberate choice to leave the wound open, to not let him heal through a conversation with her, to make him heal, if at all, on his own, in Dumptown, and beyond, without her participation. And that choice, I think, is an act of respect for CJ. She did not owe him a conversation. She did not owe him closure. She walked out of the wedding on her bicycle, and she was done. And the show honored her choice by never forcing her back. Her silence across the last 2 seasons is her voice. It is the loudest thing in the show, if you know to listen for it. It is the sound of a woman who refused to be anyone's second chance. That respect for CJ is, ironically, the deepest grace the show ever shows to Mordecai, because it forces him to grow without her. It denies him the comfort of her forgiveness. It makes him build his life on the truth of what he did, rather than on a reconciliation that would have let him off the hook. And the Mordecai we see at the end of the show, with Steph, with his children, with his art career, is the Mordecai who has had to live for years with the knowledge that CJ is out there, somewhere, living her life, and she will never speak to him again. And that is a fact about him, and he has to carry it. Whether he carries it well or poorly, we do not see. The show does not show it, but the carrying is real. It has to be real, because the alternative, that he simply forgot her, is even darker. And the show, by leaving it ambiguous, lets us decide which alternative we can stand. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is one more element of the episode worth examining, because it is the element that most people miss on first watch. It is the moment, right after CJ runs out of the wedding, where Margaret looks at CJ with a specific expression. The show cuts to her face, briefly, as CJ is leaving. Margaret is not smug. Margaret is not relieved. Margaret is sad. Margaret looks, for that 1 second, like a person who understands that she has also just been written out of the equation, because Mordecai, in his speech, asked the soulmate question out loud, and his body failed to gesture at her either. He did not point at Margaret any more than he pointed at CJ. He scanned. He gestured at strangers. He did not pick anyone. And Margaret, who had been maintaining the quiet fantasy since Merry Christmas Mordecai, possibly since Just Friends would confirm, that maybe, eventually, Mordecai would come back to her, realizes in that moment that he will not. Because a person who is going to come back to you does not do this. A person who is going to come back to you handles his current relationship with grace, and then, months later, has a thoughtful conversation with you about whether there is still something there. A person who hijacks a wedding with a soulmate speech is not thinking about you. He is not thinking about anyone. He is only thinking about himself. And when Margaret sees that, she loses her quiet fantasy too. In one speech, Mordecai loses both women. He does not mean to lose Margaret. He did not walk up to the podium with the intent of ending anything with her, but he does. Her post-speech face is a face that has just absorbed a piece of information. The information is that he is not capable of coming back. The information is that she has also been seeing an illusion. The next episode, after Dumped at the Altar, which is Dumptown, USA, airs the following day on Cartoon Network. 2 weeks have passed in Showtime. Mordecai has been grieving himself in Dumptown. Margaret, presumably, has been processing her own version of the wedding. Margaret does not run away. Margaret does not cut off contact with the friend group. Margaret is still in the orbit. But something has shifted, and the shift never quite unshifts. From that point forward, through Season 7 and into Season 8, Margaret is in the show in a very different way than she was before. She is a friend. She is a character with her own career, her own concerns, her own life. She is less defined by her relationship to Mordecai. In the episode Local News Legend, she finally gets her own news segment. In the final battle, in the series finale, she shows up to hug Eileen when the park comes back from space. She is present. She is accounted for. She is just not, anymore, the question she used to be. She resolved herself, off-screen, somewhere between the wedding and the last season, into a person who is not waiting for Mordecai anymore. And that resolution is the cleaner version of what CJ did in the opposite direction. CJ left. Margaret stayed, but stopped wanting. Both choices are valid. Both choices are what a mature person does when a relationship turns out to be unreachable. Mordecai, alone of the main women in his romantic life, never quite gets there. He gets to Steph. He gets to New York. He gets to Art. But the version of him that could have, in the months after the wedding, had a conversation with CJ about what he did, and taken responsibility for it, and apologized to her in a way that would have let them both move on as, at minimum, distant acquaintances. That version of Mordecai does not exist in the show. We do not see him apologize to her. We do not see him write her a letter. We do not see him reflect aloud, to Rigby or anyone else, on what he owes her. The moment passes. He goes to Dumptown. He comes back. He starts drawing. Life continues. And CJ becomes, in his mind, presumably, a regret. A regret that may or may not visit him in the night. A regret that may or may not ever be spoken aloud. The show does not tell us. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This is the quiet, bleak tale of the episode that nobody talks about. That Mordecai, because he was unable to have the private conversation that would have prevented the wedding speech, loses the capacity to have any future private conversation with her at all. His inability to do the work in time cost him the opportunity to do the work ever. CJ's exit from his life closed that door permanently. He cannot apologize because she will not take his call. He cannot explain himself because she does not want the explanation. He cannot make amends because amends require the other party to accept them, and she has taken herself out of the amends market. The only person he can apologize to now is himself, and the apology is a lonely one, and he has to live with it. That is the true cost of the worst decision, not the public humiliation, not the broken relationship, not the fractured friend group, the private, lifelong impossibility of repair, the fact that he will never get to fix it, the fact that there is no version of his future in which CJ forgives him because she has decided not to, and her decision stands. That is the thing he has to carry, and he has to carry it without anyone watching. He has to carry it in small moments for the rest of his life. Every so often, on a Tuesday evening, sitting in his apartment in New York, he will remember the bracelet, or the bicycle, or the third row of chairs at the wedding, or the face of a woman who loved him, cut into by what he was doing, who could not keep watching, who turned around and left. And he will sit with it, and nobody will see, because that is how the worst decisions work. They do not stay public. They retreat into the private. They live with you alone, in the quiet, for years. There is one detail about the final cut of the episode that is worth dwelling on, because it speaks to the quality of the show's craft at this specific moment. The animation in Dumped at the Altar is, by regular show standards, unusually restrained. There are no surreal set pieces. There are no demonic transformations. There are no reality-bending monsters. The entire episode, apart from Benson's car being destroyed by a falling turducken from a deep fryer accident, is grounded. It takes place at a wedding venue and in the nearby woods, where Mordecai and Rigby hunt for the letter. The color palette is muted. The music is not flashy. The show, at the level of its production choices, is telling you that this is going to be a serious episode, not a comedic one, long before the speech happens. And when the speech happens, the show does not cut away. It holds on Mordecai's face. It holds on CJ's face. It holds on the room. There is no escape into a gag. There is no surreal distraction. The show locks the camera on the human drama and refuses to look away. And that refusal is, in a show that usually cannot go 10 minutes without a zombie or a time portal, a declaration of seriousness. The writers are telling you, with the visual grammar of the episode, that this moment deserves to be watched in real time, without relief. That choice, to treat the wedding speech as the kind of thing that you cannot turn into a joke, is itself a kind of comment on Mordecai. It is the show saying, this time, the consequences are real. This time, we are not going to bail him out with a monster attack or a side quest. This time, he has to sit in what he did, and the audience has to sit in it with him. It is one of the few moments in the entire series where the show's tonal machinery is fully engaged in service of emotional weight rather than comedy. And if you compare the visual treatment of the wedding speech to the visual treatment of, say, Stake Me Amadeus, which is also a serious episode, you can see the progression. Stake Me Amadeus ends with a sunset and a soda. It is sad, but it is also beautiful. Dumped at the Altar ends with a receiving line and a broken woman on a bicycle. There is no beauty in it. There is no aesthetic salve. The show has given up on making his pain look pretty. It is just pain now. It is just the consequence of the thing. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. One more thing worth mentioning, before we close, is the specific role Rigby plays in this episode and in the aftermath. Rigby has always been Mordecai's counterweight. Rigby is the one who says the wrong thing out loud, who acts on impulse, who makes the short-term bad choice that the show then has to clean up. And Mordecai, for most of the show's run, has been positioned as the corrective. Mordecai is the one who sees the long game. Mordecai is the one who understands consequences. That is the joke at the heart of their friendship. Rigby is chaos. Mordecai is order. Dumped at the Altar is the episode where that joke inverts. Rigby is the one who is in a stable, functional relationship. Rigby is the one who has been quietly building something real with Eileen for months. And Mordecai is the one who, on this specific day, becomes the agent of chaos that destroys someone's wedding. The inversion is the heart of the comedy and the tragedy simultaneously. Rigby, realizing what is about to happen, tries to stop him. He hisses at him from the crowd. He makes desperate faces. But Mordecai is already gone. He is already at the podium. He is already inside the speech. And Rigby, the person who has spent his whole life being pulled out of fires by Mordecai, watches his best friend walk into the fire he cannot put out. That reversal is why, later, in Dumptown, when Rigby comes to drag Mordecai back, it feels earned. Rigby has become, for the first time in the show, the more functional member of the pair. He is the one who can rescue Mordecai, because he is the one who still has a working romantic life, who still has a relationship with Eileen to return to. Mordecai has nothing, and Rigby, patient and slightly exasperated, pulls him out. The symmetry of the whole arc is deeply satisfying. The character who spent 6 seasons being the mess has become the rescuer, and the character who spent 6 seasons being the rescuer has become the mess. That is the kind of long-term narrative payoff that shows this patient only get to execute when they are confident in their own architecture. Regular show, at its peak, which is arguably this era, knows what it is doing. It knows what it is trading. It is trading a happy ending for Mordecai in exchange for an honest portrait of a person who cannot pick. And the portrait is truer than any happy ending would have been. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Dumped at the Altar, as an episode, was met with a fractured reaction on release. Many fans found it deeply uncomfortable to watch. Many fans cited it as the worst Mordecai moment in the show's run. Many fans said they quit watching regular show after this episode. The episode currently holds a respectable IMDb rating around 8.1 out of 10. But the comments and reviews across platforms are a war zone. Some hate Mordecai for what he did. Some hate CJ for cutting him off before he finished. Some hate Margaret for coming back. Some hate the writers for doing this to beloved characters. And that intensity of reaction, the fact that people are still arguing about this episode 10 years later, is itself a measure of what the episode accomplished. You do not get that kind of reaction from a forgettable piece of television. You get it from something that hit a nerve. The episode made people feel something specific, and the thing it made them feel was uncomfortable, and the discomfort lingered. That is what good storytelling does. That is what a season finale should aspire to. Not everyone has to love it, but everyone has to be made to think about it. And Dumped at the Altar, for better or worse, has been thought about, argued about, written about, and video essayed about for a decade. It is not going away. The reason it is not going away is that it captures something true about how relationships end in the real world, and also something true about how people like Mordecai sabotage their own chances at love over and over in ways that are not malicious, but are lethal. That is the universal form of the speech. That is what makes the episode stick. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And that is the end of the story. Or rather, that is the part of the story the show will not show you. The show ends on Steph and the children and the park reunion, and David Bowie's heroes playing over a montage. The show ends in color and movement and hope. And somewhere, inside that montage, Mordecai is a man who also carries the wedding speech with him. He just does not show it. He has had 25 years to learn how not to show it, and he has, presumably, learned. He looks content in the final scene, with Rigby drinking a soda on the park steps, reminiscing about old times. He does not mention CJ. Nobody does. The absence is just an absence. It does not get named. It is just there, like the space where a piece of furniture used to be in a room you still live in, and you still walk around it out of habit, and you do not know why. And then one day, you remember. That is how the worst decisions live in you. They live in you as the shape of the rooms you learn to walk around. Mordecai's worst decision was not choosing himself. It was not wanting to. It was the refusal, across his entire adult life, to be the kind of person who could choose anyone, and the catastrophic moment in which that refusal became visible to the only people who loved him. The speech at the wedding was the most specific possible expression of the most fundamental possible flaw in his character. It was him, in one long sentence, telling everyone he knew that he did not know how to pick. And the person who paid for that sentence was not him. It was her. It was the woman on the bicycle. It was CJ, riding away from the wedding into the rest of her life. Without him, without any of them. A year of her life in her rearview mirror. A bracelet in his hand. A Batwoman waiting for him in a future he did not yet know he would have. That is the story. That is the whole story. That is Mordecai's worst decision. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.